Okay, so today in this section here, next thing we want to talk about is parlor types. We're thinking about milking parlors. We're going to hopefully increase the efficiency, the speed at which we do things. So we reduce our maintenance time, less time spent milking per animal, and we have more get ahead time to do other things. Parlors we're going to talk about a flat barn, side opening. Those are sort of transitions. We don't see many side openings anymore, but they are still floating around. The herringbone, parallel, swing, rotary, and then we'll kind of introduce robots and let you guys play with flat barn parlors. We have a transition facility between a tie stall and a parlor. So instead of taking the machines to every animal in the place, we're sort of collecting all the milking equipment in one part, and we bring the cows to them. Usually, University of Wisconsin, done studies on this, usually doubling the efficiency, half the time spent per animal when it comes to milking, and we get either the same job done in less time, or we can do more animals in the same amount. So if we get our laser pointer out here, so bring that out. Um, we have animals coming in this way. They're going to get up on this platform. Head is going to be in this area here caught. We're going to stand at the side here in the pit and we're going to milk that animal. Each of these, we got sets of 2 around each platform. So this looks like a double 8 or double 4, 8 stalls total. Each end of it animal can be released individually. You've got individual, well, I guess it's more than 4 on this side. Each end of it animal can be released individually. We look about how that happens. You've got the headlocks, hold them in place till they're done milking, and then we move forward, individually exit. Um, so this company talks about faster milking. Everything's gravity operated, reduced things. So the controller is that you hope you can do most of the work yourself to keep the cost down. If you had to buy too much or spend too much on it, you're going to lose the efficiency. So when we're looking at our parlor, this is kind of an overhead view. So we have 4 stalls, 1, 2, 3, 4. Your first cow is going to go in here, head up here, udder back here, second, third, fourth, and then you're going to milk from this pit. So you have a little area here where your boots go, your toes go, so you can get closer to the animal in more comfort. It doesn't seem like a big thing, but it makes a huge difference. We see here we've got 12 to 17 inches. The animals seem pretty easy about jumping up, getting on that platform. Although we talk about in facilities where not more than 10 inches, I've seen jerseys just kind of jump up over the moon to get up on those platforms. Doesn't seem to be a big problem. So we're milking from the side. You might have a drain in there. You're milking from the side, the animals, and then as we finish up milking, we let the animals go. Next animal comes in. We can either treat it like the side of a parlor, or probably for the maximum efficiency, we just keep putting on the next animal that comes in. If we look at flow through the system, there are a lot of different ways this can happen. Um, Probably limited by your imagination. We have a common entrance area. Animals go up on either side, go up, and then they're going to exit. In this case, go around to a common exit. We might have exits on both sides depending on what we need or have. It's probably easier to have a common exit, one exit leading back to wherever they need to go. We kind of have going in one end, going out the other. So whatever needs to happen, whatever needs to be, there's some flexibility. So flat barn parlors, they're generally transition facilities. You're looking at 50 to 150 animals. Seems to work best. We look at the advantages over tie stalls. We have increased labor efficiency, which we've already mentioned. We can handle more cows per worker or get milking done that much faster. We think about a low capital investment for this increased labor efficiency. These setups, especially if you do a lot of the work yourself, are not as expensive as some of the more complete setups. You can usually use your own equipment, your own pipeline if you think about it, or you set it up right. You bring all the milking equipment down to one end of a barn or one area. So when you're talking about operating at lower cost, milking, the time associated with it becomes lower. You've got labor savings. You can either reduce the number of workers or you're not spending as many hours as you did before. You have a smaller maintenance of a smaller milking facility. You don't have a pipeline that goes all the way around the barn. You just have one area there. There should be, because of that, less hot water and chemicals needed for cleaning. You don't have as much surface area to cover. So, less operating costs, labor savings. This is a transition to something bigger. We met with a farmer who talks about the family business growing and how this barn paid for that barn, paid for that barn. So the tie stall pays for the flat parlor pays for something bigger and more efficient. So we'll show you some examples as we move forward as we take some of the lectures from the University of Wisconsin. Flat barn, we're talking about the conversion. You can have quite the range of costs here. We're talking 6,000 to 60,000. That conversion cost, the lower we can keep it, the more likely we are to be successful and have it pay itself back. This involves doing more of the work yourself, buying used equipment, repurposing as much of the equipment that you own already, making sure that we can keep our costs down. The work of the University of Wisconsin talks about keeping below 20,000 to stay competitive, to stay in a place where you can make it pay for itself. Maximum flow is usually achieved by single cow movement rather than in shifts. So as a cow gets done, you let her go, bring in a replacement, get her prepped, get her milking, and we can take advantage of that best. If we try to do all the animals at once, there's too much motion, there's too much going around where we really can't get them all prepped at the same time or in sequence. Side opening parlors. These are things we saw a long time ago, very popular for a while. We don't see many of them left on the countryside, but they are there. So you have a full side view of the cow from the pit down here. Cows are end to end. So you've got a head here, butt there, head here. Each of these stalls has an entrance. You can sort of see the gate in the back there and an exit, a gate there. So they come in, they stand in there, and then they leave in the front. That the animals come in, we close the gate, we milk them, we open the gate, and they go back out. So there's a common entrance exit alley associated with that. Each of these has those twin gates moving through. This is my attempt at an overhead person. They're very square shouldered moving forward. So this is a more complete diagram of that same thing. So animals, this animal just left through here. We'll open this gate up and this gate up and let that animal in to either of those. They will be milked and released. We have the entrance coming in on either side. We have a common exit going out through. As you can imagine, you could do these as many different ways as you can possibly think of, only limited by your imagination. But pros and cons. Again, the animals can enter and release individually, but it's not probably as efficient as that flat parlor. slow cow doesn't hold up any of the milking. We can have a fairly high stall use rate. If we're looking at 7, 8 cows per hour, that's one every 7 or 8 minutes going through. So that's possible, especially with lower producers. We can get them prepped in a minute or so, and they milk out in 4 or 5 minutes. We get them in and out. Um, it's possible, but you really have to have that next animal ready and waiting to go. Um, they might be a little inefficient. You've got one person only controlling a small amount of stalls. With larger parlors, we've seen people taking care of um, instead of 4 stalls or 4 cows, you're looking at 10, 12 animals going through. So they might be there. They're harder to watch the end machines. So if you're standing there, you've got a lot of distance between your milking machines. It's harder to keep an eye on them, especially if you're doing manual takeoff. These systems are not easily expandable. If you look at the system up at the Morrisville Dairy, we could easily expand that parlor if we had the money to a double 12. It really doesn't make a lot of sense with the number of cows we have, but we could do it. These systems, given the length and width dimensions, it's really hard to do that. And compared to a flat parlor, there's a lot more metal in them, so there's going to be more gates. There's going to be a lot more costs associated with them on a per stall basis. You've got inefficiencies between these animals that you're not dead space here, the diagonals here, you're losing space that's not being real productive. Where everything's nice and squared off in the parallel, you don't have that. You maybe wasted space there, maybe wasted space there. So you're adding square footage that's maybe not being used. But again, some people parallel parlors, we talk about the opposite. We have the animals closer together, there's shorter walking distances. You don't have to have the length of parlor or length of building when you're putting a parallel in. It's going to have to be wider, usually, because you're going to have a rapid exit on both sides. So you may gain and lose depending on how things come together. Traditional support arms cannot be used. I think we're getting pretty creative. I've seen some solutions to that support arm so we can get those things balanced out a little bit better. Um, Also harder to balance the machines. Again, I'm not sure that that is as legitimate a concern as when they first come out. I've seen some pretty creative systems that allow us to hold that milking machine up if we need to and tilt it in different directions so we get um, better accommodation to the udder that we're working with. Parlors, they're somewhere between the herringbone and the parallel. Um, there, we usually have a steeper angle. Probably what you saw in the previous diagram is more typical of a swing parlor. You're probably on that angle that you're seeing in that diagram, you're probably milking from between the back legs just like you would in a parallel. So you've got a greater angle than your typical herringbone. We're probably at 45 up the dairy complex. You see in that diagram, that's a much stronger, much more aggressive angle. Um, so we're milking between the um, rear legs, usually on the swing parlor, and we're thinking about a pit that might be much narrower because you're taking, by definition, you're taking machines from one side of the parlor and using them on the opposite. So therefore, you have half the milking machines. You've got less pipeline, less vacuum, but you don't have two sets going at one time. So there's some trade-offs there. Some people feel it's worth it, some people don't. So you have to pencil that out and see if that uh, less units, less cost, less stalls in some way, shape, or form help make that a more viable option for your business. When we're thinking about a swing parlor, we've got Units over here, we've only got half the cleaning stations, half the units. You see the elbow here, that's going to rotate around and allow that unit to be put on the other side. There's sometimes flexibility with the number of animals that you can get into these places. So sometimes you might have an extra unit or two. So if you get, smaller animals, you get more in there, you have a unit to get there. The advantage of having an extra unit is that you can, with a slow animal, you can leave a unit on one side and swing everything over and get the other side milking. So you're not everything is not totally held up by that swing or that one animal. Yeah, nobody's moving on either side, but you're not waiting. You're not waiting for one unit to get there. Another way to handle that, a lot of places will identify their slow milkers with a band color. You know, sometimes just tying a piece of plastic or a breeding glove around a leg to identify that slow milker. So soon as they come in, you get a machine on them as quickly as possible. So sometimes the machines will trade places or cross over depending on what we have. So your pros, maximizing cow movement efficiency. So they're not twisting and turning. They're coming in, lining up and getting ready to go. Cows are going to walk straight in and straight out. You got a chop gate usually at either end to control them. They're a lower cost, especially on a per stall basis, than herringbone or traditional herringbone and parallel parlors, and fewer milking units are needed to get the job done. Now you're going to slow down the process a little bit, but you can prep while you're waiting for the other side to finish up. Um, the milking machines are more or less always working instead of being idle about half the time. Cons, you've got milking hoses, as you can see in that diagram, that are going to hang in the pit. So you're going to be working around dodging hoses as you go through. You're going to have more hose to deal with when it comes time to change things. There are certain inefficiencies associated with switching from side to side, and I'm not aware of any system that I've seen that has those support arms that get the job done. So again, this is not maybe a full system, but it's a step up from another system. It's a way of uh, working up and as you go through. Next one, we'll talk about rotaries. So you got the cows on the merry-go-round. They'll enter, looks like they're entering over here. They get on, they ride around, they're milked, they're prepped, they're dipped, and then they exit as they get that one revolution on the other. So again, we've got animals. Each station has its own milking unit that can be a challenge. That also can be, just more cost. But we're looking at bigger operations. It's pretty much the only way to go getting through. So rotary parlors, real advantage to rotary parlors is the uniform routine. The routine is determined by the speed of the carousel going around. So you've got a spot where you're going to clean, disinfect, dip. You've got a spot where you're going to clean and attach. You've got a spot where you're going to post dip on the other end. So because of the spacing, you've got uniform stimulation time, uniform contact time. That doesn't vary as you go from one end of the parlor to the other. Every animal is pretty much the same. Cows like consistency. Cows are always moving through the system, and the uniform, more consistent milking procedures routine vary form. The problem is certainly upfront cost. You've got a whole lot more units that are sitting there, and they're probably idle about a third of the time. Normally takes at least 3 operators to get that going, so you probably want something big enough to justify that. They are non-expandable. We said our dairy complex situation, we could expand if we wanted. We knock out the front, we move forward, we have 4 spaces that we could put them in. Once you establish that circle, it is not changeable. without redoing the entire system. So they're not expandable and they're harder to provide special care. We don't really have a way to treat animals in that situation. The carousel is constantly moving. We don't do shots. We don't do vaccinations, any of that in these systems. So you're going to have to find some sort of sorting gate, some sort of stand to get that stuff done. Robots, you've all seen robots in 160. You've seen how they work. There are really some great advantages about the individual um, handling of each quarter, individual handling of each cow, what they can do, the data they can collect. Um, I think we've really just figured the um, tip of the iceberg on a lot of this, and you can see that these companies are really starting to dig into the data and how they might use it and how they might be better off using the AI, the artificial intelligence, to pull out actions, to pull out thoughts that you might want to consider. Robots, advantages and challenges. You've seen them, you've talked about them. We're going to probably add this as an assignment and or discussion board. So give that some thought and be ready to answer. And that should be it for this set.